Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. Andy, you are fresh off of the trailer for Giant. Give me your hot take.
Well, it's big.
It is big.
It's a beefy trailer. It's got the great line, you should have killed him a long time ago. Now he's too rich to kill.
I know, right?
Seems like, I don't know if that's the Texan approach.
Well, back in the day, Andy.
Maybe still present.
It's a,
I don't know.
A mighty monument of memorable entertainment, Andy. That's what this is.
Oh, and love.
There has to be love. What I wonder, what if you could help me? What kind of name is Bick? It feels like a name that they just ran out of nicknames in Texas, and they started with Rick, and then Mick, and then like Boxer,
like,
Boxer, Boots, Buster, Saddle. Like they just, and then eventually they just landed on, we're out of letters. Let's just start from the beginning again, and it's just going to be Bick. And that feels like it feels like not a suitable character nickname for an actor named Rock.
Bick and Rock. Bick is actually a name, Pete. This is interesting. It's a name of English origin and means from the hewer's ford.
Those are more words that don't mean anything, Andy. It's all in a row.
From a Hewer's Ford. Yes.
So this trailer, it is big. There is a giant, like, big letter print book that turns pages. It has lovely watercolors of our principal characters throughout the film. It has, so there are lots of pages turning, which is, I guess, giant. Maybe because it's based on a book. Also, I think probably to make a call to the sort of fairy tale nature of this epic Texas story.
Sorry, I'm so stuck on Bick now.
Oh.
I'm reading on names.org about the name Bick. This is good to know, Pete. How unique is the name Bick? From 1880 to 2016, less than 5 people per year have been born with the first name Bick. And then it clarifies that. It says, "Hurrah! You are a unique individual." I think the film, the book technique that they use is kind of a peculiar one. I get that it's based on this classic, I don't know if it's a classic novel, but Edna Ferber's book. I was going to say Bick, and it's not her Bick. It's her book.
It's definitely not her Bick.
Giant. And it's, so do we need to have the page turn just to represent that? It seems a little silly that it goes into that. I'm not 100% sure it's needed to kind of do the page turning thing. I don't know. It was kind of an odd choice, I thought.
Here's the thing I was interested in. There's a lot of James Dean in this trailer, right? I mean, it feels like there's a bunch of James Dean. We get the oil in the beginning, and then we get James Dean discovering the oil. And it makes you think this is kind of a James Dean vehicle.
Look at what they're on the heels of,
yeah.
Right? James Dean's death and his 2 previous films, which were successes.
And by the time they're cutting this trailer, they already knew he was dead.
Yeah, I mean, this came out a year later, so any opportunity to kind of highlight the James Dean side of this film, I think, is one that they're going to absolutely take. So I can see why they emphasized him so much. I mean, Rock Hudson was fresh on the heels of All That Heaven Allows. So he certainly is somebody who was in the spotlight as well. It's not like he was an unknown by any stretch of the imagination. Same with Elizabeth Taylor. It's definitely a trio of very popular actors at the time. But I do think that the emphasis of James Dean, in particular, because, it really is kind of a story of the Benedicts. And in particular, we're watching the relationship over, the 25 years of the story between Leslie and Bick. And to a large extent, James Dean kind of becomes the antagonist in the film. And to that end, I think it's kind of exciting to see that element of him in the trailer here and get some of that tension that's going on here.
Yeah, and we get that here. We don't have, I think, enough of that truly memorable age makeup in the trailer. We get some snippets of it, but you don't really get to focus on it the way you do as you watch the film, which I can't wait to talk about. But bottom line, as you said, coming off of where James Dean had been and his just overall publicity, this trailer, if you're a James Dean fan of the time, you would have seen this movie. You would have gone to see it, I think, right? I mean, that's the case we're making.
I think, yeah, absolutely. I think that, they push everybody. They don't push everybody as much as James Dean, but they certainly feature everybody prominently here. And I think everybody who is a Rock Hudson fan is going to go see this. This is just one of those big epic movies that I think everybody was going to go see because it's so big.
Yeah.
The trailer makes it feel like this is big and everybody who's anybody is going to be going to see this movie.
The trailer makes it feel big.
This is Texas, mighty colossus of the Southwest, a land of infinite variety and violent contrasts, a land where today's ranch hand can become tomorrow's multimillionaire.
This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, George Stevens brings us Texas' own Gone with the Wind in his 1956 James Dean epic, Giant. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel.
And if you're enjoying tuning into our show and are interested in supporting our ongoing work investigating more great films that we're talking about, please consider a regular donation through our Patreon page. You'll get to join our back channel conversations on Discord, help us pick movies for upcoming series, and listen to the members-only weekend show, The Saturday Matinee, where we talk movies, trailers, and more. Plus, we have a battle of the list of movies related to our show that week. In honor of the film we're talking about tonight, this week's list will be Western epics. Just head on over to patreon.com/thenextreel.
But more than a state, here is a state of mind, manners, morals, emotions, of people who are often as exhilarating, exasperating, exciting as the land they belong to.
The way you told me to get ready for this movie, Andy, was to get real excited, just real excited about the age makeup. It's not great. It's not great.
Are you glad that I at least prepared?
I am
you for
really
it?
glad. That would have been a souring factor in my review of this movie. Can we? I want to follow up on what we started with just a minute ago on what it means to be a
Bick?
big.
We're back to Bick.
It's a big Bick movie. What it means to be a big movie, because I struggled with this movie. I really struggled with it, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure why. Because for me, where Gone with the Wind felt like a big movie to me, this movie just felt long. It felt way too long, and it felt like that it just sort of stomped over parts of the story that I wanted to see more of, and lingered on parts of the story that were insufferable.
It's interesting. I think that there's a nature of kind of these epic films, especially something that happened in this period. I think that there was kind of a call for these big epics, and people really enjoyed longer films that really wrapped you up in a full story. I think maybe we're seeing fewer of those these days. One, because it takes up a screen for a much longer time and they can't squeeze as many shows in. And two, I think that the way TV has evolved nowadays, it's much easier to take a long story and turn it into a kind of an epic miniseries that we see so often with things like the Hatfields and McCoys comes to mind as kind of a big story that they allowed a much longer time to do it, and they did it on TV. Mm-hmm. I think that the just the nature of the story lingering, I don't know. I guess it's one of those things. It can work. I don't think that this one fails by any stretch of the imagination. I actually do find myself enjoying it. Is it one of my favorite epics? No. I do struggle with some of it, but on the whole, I actually ended up kind of enjoying it. And I think it's just one of those things that if you can click with the characters and you can kind of find a place to latch on, it might be easier to kind of sit with it and just kind of enjoy the ride. Yeah,
possibly. I think to your point, I really clicked with Jet, James Dean's character. I really clicked with him. He was absolutely my favorite thing in here, and I think he showcased what a fantastic character actor he would have been. I think this movie is a case study in what he was able to do, especially coming right off of the last two films, where he was not this. He was not the Texas ranch hand, and by the middle of the film, I bought it. I had forgotten earlier than that. I mean, God, the film's 3 days long. I'd forgotten that I had just seen him in Rebel Without a Cause, and he was just Jet, and I really enjoyed the performance. I struggled with the character, with the way the character was written, and this is where I have problems with the story, and I'm not sure if I should blame, the book or the adaptation. But I really do have some challenges with the story and the way they use the characters to get these things done. There's the alcoholism through line that is at best perforated. I struggle with that. I struggle with using these kinds of elements only when they need to move a particular plot point forward. I really struggle with Jet's turn from the clumsy Texas ranch hand to the demonic drunk tycoon. I'm not sure I bought it. I'm not sure I found it credible. It's certainly not what I wanted, and I found myself really disappointed at the sort of lack of satisfying resolution to the potential romance. That's kind of what I look for in these movies, is then that love triangle was right in the beginning, that was set up very early. And I sort of felt unresolved there too.
It's an interesting point, the idea of the relationship and the potential love triangle. I actually found it pretty interesting that they opted to not go that route and instead have later in the story have Jet actually start kind of hitting on their daughter, their youngest daughter, Luz, and Luz Jr. I don't know what we're calling her, but it's in a weirdly creepy way where it's like this, I don't know how old he would be then, like in his 50s maybe, hitting on this, late teen, early 20s. And it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, that's just downright kind of creepy now. But I think it played in really in an interesting way with him as a character, in particular as kind of our antagonist. So I totally see your point, and I get where you're coming from. I guess I just really was drawn into the story largely by Leslie, and I found Elizabeth Taylor just mesmerizing on screen. Everything she did was great, and just the way she welcomed herself to this world and kind of buckled down and jumped in, even though she was, it wasn't her place. She's this prim and proper back east lady, and just kind of seeing her journey and how she adapts to it and kind of pushes Bick to kind of change his ways a little bit, and the way that she still tries to play nice with Jet, even after the kind of the whole thing with the oil and everything. I don't know. I guess I just ended up enjoying watching this Texas family and the journey that they were making over the course of the film. And I guess in my head, I ended up starting to think quite a bit as I was watching it about, okay, what is the title referencing? Is it,
That's
it's
a great
not really,
question.
We know there are no giants. We've established that.
Man, this movie, why do you like this movie at all?
Right. It fails the Detroit test.
The Detroit test so resoundingly. There are no giants. And apart from the wedding scene where Rock Hudson is a full 2 heads taller than everyone else.
Okay, so it's either Texas in just kind of the giant sense of it, but I think largely it falls to Bick, and he's kind of this. He's this giant landowner. He has this mega cattle ranch. He's always lounging about with senators and whatnot. But and then for me, it really boiled down to the end of the film when he kind of finally changes his tune with in regards to his daughter-in-law, who happens to be Mexican, and when they stop at this diner, and you get this great scene where the owner tries to kick out this Mexican family, and Bick defends them, and he gets in fisticuffs with this guy and loses. And then at the end of the film, it's a really nice bit with Leslie telling him, after he's like, I'm a failure, nothing's turned out like I planned, and she's like, you are at last my hero after everything that has gone on through our lives. Now the Benedict name, I can't remember what she says, but it's like it's a success. Yeah. And I thought that was actually really nice, the way that it evolved, and for me became symbolic of what the giant was, and is just kind of that growth that he goes through in transforming his company and his focus on his way of life.
I think that's a great point. And to that, I would just say that example, and in fact, his final standoff with Jet, where he puts up his dukes, but then does not carry on with the fight, because Jet's just wasted. That he's standing up for his son whatever you might say about his son's argument to that effect. But then he goes and stands up for his daughter-in-law. It adds such resonance to the relationship between his son that was strained. And I found that the resolution of those elements at the end, those two fights where he's willing to stand up, was resolution that came, I don't know if it was just a sort of unearned, that I felt great about it. Like, I really enjoyed watching it. And I think Rock Hudson's portrayal in this movie finally got interesting for me in the last third of the movie as a result of all these kinds of changes that he was going. He definitely changed. He grew as a character. And I just had so little patience for him in the first 2/3 of the movie that it felt like unearned resolution to me. And so as much as I really like that, and I think you're right, it shines a spotlight on what this movie, could have been all about, and what this movie was poking at, and I feel like it also sort of peels back the holes that I really wanted filled. And I'm going to give you one example because I'm interested in your take on it. Part of what makes Leslie so interesting is her role as an advocate for this village of the Mexicans who are doing the work on the farm, right?
Correct.
And she goes out there to investigate them, and she says, this is just a scandal. It's a scandal how they're living, and they're sick, and it's a scandal. And then that narrative is over, right? We don't see any evidence. She brings somebody down. She brings this doctor down to work with them at their little village, and then it's over. Like, then we never get to see that work of her life come to any sort of fruition. And I found that really frustrating. She makes such a big deal about it, about that being her role, and that, really pushing on the boundaries of sort of, her rights as a woman in that family and in marriage and in that community. And then I found myself really frustrated that we didn't actually get to see if they made any significant changes in their homes. We never went back there.
Well, I think I would argue, I largely, I think you're right. I do feel that it gets dropped a little bit. But I would say, okay, there is Salminio as Angel all grown up. And so, and he's really largely there because of the care that she put in and basically saved his life and everything. Like, that to me was that representation of that, and without having to see it. So to me it worked, but I can see your point where it's not letting us kind of go along and seeing some of that. Because
for me, what that angle represented is a change in the culture of the ranch hand, right? And the rancher. And what we saw in Salminio is her sending her doctor, her white doctor, to the Mexican camp to save that one child. And later she brings another doctor down to support them. But we never see how the ranch was changed. I guess that's what I'm talking about, because I see your point. I mean, she definitely saved Angel, and by her intervention. That's not pushing at the boundary of culture. That's her sticking her nose in something where everybody said didn't belong to save that one boy.
I totally get it. I see your point. I guess in my mind, I just felt like there's always these little things going on, and she's kind of sticking her finger in, because we see her constantly sticking her finger in things. She's got very much women's rights mentality. And when these men are all sitting around talking and they keep trying to not include her, she just lays into them, which was just fantastic.
Yes.
And that doesn't come back that much either, except in conversation. And that's where I think it is, because they talk about, I like a little vinegar with my salad, or whatever he says. And other people saying, oh, she's always had a way of saying things, or, they all have kind of an opinion of her, and she's created this personality, and everybody's kind of adapted to it. And to a certain extent, I'd say probably going along with some of her things, even though they may not completely see eye to eye with her. And I certainly think that Bick has kind of fallen into that, as far as helping out with the Mexican families living on the property, even though he's probably rolling his eyes, and we get that sense when his son is Dennis Hopper kind of comes and introduces his new wife and everything. And he tells him later, he's like, I told you you were asking for it. It's like that mentality that he has, even though I think that Leslie has kind of changed his mind to a certain extent. So I don't know. I see your point, but I also feel like it wasn't an issue movie. It was just, watching these people and just kind of the way that they were adapting to this world.
Yeah, and I guess I would just say to that, in a movie that's 3 hours and 22 minutes long, they have the runway to resolve something.
But I think they do.
Well, again, agree to disagree. To your point, I think that one of the things that the elements that I like so much about this, that we see how Bick changes over the course of the film, and I think we can largely attribute his relationship with Leslie to his own change, even as much as he struggles with his own issues. That Jet doesn't change, and Jet didn't get her. And Jet wanted her. That love was unrequited, and I think that's really interesting when you look at how those two pair off at the end of the movie, Jet and Bick. Jet doesn't make it, arguably. He is left on the floor, and Bick goes home to his family, and a family that ends on a symbol of enormous progress for the time, right? That there is there are the two toddlers there, and one is a white toddler and one is a mixed race a Mexican toddler with his son. It was amazing that a movie ends on that sequence. So I really did enjoy that element of it.
Well, not only that, but I think that allowed for this film to have what ended up being, for me, a really powerful first shot, last shot.
Yeah.
Because the first shot we get, as the credits are rolling, it's just a big sprawling Texas with tons of cattle and oil rigs, and you get a sense of kind of what Texas is all about, at least as far as what Bick is concerned with, right? It's the money and the cattle and all of that sort of stuff. But then by the time we get to the end, it's changed its focus. And I found that to be quite a powerful way to kind of go through this story about this man and what becomes the focus of his life, and just the way that Texas is changing too.
Yeah, right. When you get to see that was a great example of a value system at work, right? When we have all these signals of stubbornness and his just absolute fear of change, and his family and the people who work with him, constantly prodding him after one of the many calls that he takes with Jet, trying to have him sell the rest of the oil rights to the farm, or to the ranch. I guess it was his uncle. Who was that? There is an old relationship to him. Says most expensive call you ever had, cost you about $1 billion a year for the next 50 years. Just to put a sense of scale to what he was trying to keep sacrosanct. And I thought that's a really powerful thing that they were trying to talk about here.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like that element was one of many things that they had going on here, with kind of the way that the land rights were being used and exploited.
Yeah.
Not to mention the way, like, where did the land come from? I love those little conversations, and how that is something that Jet seems to hold against Bick in the beginning, right? When he's saying things like, well, it had to come from somebody, and referencing that they basically stole all the land from the Mexicans when they took it, or bought it for cheap, whatever, 5 cents an acre or whatever. But certainly nothing that he has a problem with later. But I love that, kind of the way that we're looking at all of that, with the racism, with the women's rights, with all of this stuff. I mean, it just felt like there was a lot of stuff going on here, which was made for a really interesting film from my perspective.
Well, I just want to ask you about alcoholism in the story, and we'll talk about it with Jet in a little bit, but I found myself, one bit frustrated me, that I didn't feel like Bick had a problem with alcohol until suddenly it felt like he did. Was I missing something?
Yeah, it wasn't developed very well. I never really remember seeing him starting to drink. I just remember that all of a sudden there was a scene where he was drinking, and his son was just like, "Go easy on the bourbon, Dad."
Yeah,
it's just like, oh, is he an alcoholic all of a sudden? Like, yeah, that was a strange addition there that was never really developed effectively.
Yeah, I didn't think so either. I'm glad I wasn't alone there. Although I will say, oh man, now I can't remember the line. That same character, he says, can I start the bourbon? And he says, the bourbon will kill you. He says, it's either it or me. One of us has got to go. Something like this at the end of it. It was a great line.
I think that's Uncle Bally.
Uncle Bally, right. It's just a great line. Somebody's got to kill the bourbon. It's either him or me. Anyhow, great stuff interspersed in a very, very long movie. This movie, Andy, if you went to look for it in our famed CinemaScope, because you've had some struggles with James Dean movies in the past.
Yeah, East of Eden was
a challenge. This movie, you didn't have to worry so much.
Right. Yeah, this film was not shot in CinemaScope. Interestingly, I found this so peculiar, but I guess I can understand it. George Stevens didn't want to shoot it in CinemaScope, which was kind of the thing to shoot in when you were doing these big epics. He wanted to shoot in just kind of the standard film format, kind of the regular 1.85 to 1 aspect ratio, because he said there's a lot of height in it. And what happens with CinemaScope is you lose the height. And he wanted to emphasize the height of things, like the height of the oil rigs, the height of their house, and all of that. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I mean, you can still represent the height, in a wider screen format as well. But that was kind of his emphasis. And in a film called Giant, and where he wanted to really show the height of things, I was like, okay. I mean, I guess I'll give it to him. I thought it worked. I think they shot it in Warner color, which I think was Eastman stock, and so I will say the picture quality looked a lot worse and weirdly inconsistent. Like sometimes it was crisp and amazing, and then other times it was just really poor imagery. I don't know if that's just a function of the time, or if they were just running into problems with the technology.
I know we'll talk about this later when we talk about sequels and remakes, but I did hear that this movie is going to be remade today, but to keep it, in tune with the Giant, they're just going to shoot the whole thing portrait on. What?
I'm waiting for a CinemaScope portrait.
CinemaScope portrait, yes, yeah. That's right. And you go into the movie theater and you have to sit in a swing, and it just lifts you up and you swing to watch the movie from the middle. Oh, it's terrible. It's the worst. Edna Ferber wrote the book. Did you read it twice? Did you do your homework?
Oh, you I didn't. I've never read anything of Edna Ferber's. I've seen some other films, I think, that were adapted from her works, because she had written 3 novels that dealt with racism. This was the 3rd. Before this, it was Showboat, which was adapted for the screen twice, and then Cimarron, which was also adapted for the screen twice. How strange is that? But she was one of the I think it was one of the Vicious Circle people, wasn't she?
Oh, yeah.
Back in the day,
absolutely.
I believe she was kind of in that. Yeah, in that group with Mrs. Parker. Yeah. She did Dinner at 8, which I've seen the movie version of that, and she wrote the book Come and Get It, and I really enjoyed that film. So I've seen some other adaptations of her work, but I've never read anything of her.
Let's do the deep scene dive, Andy.
Let's do it.
This is a scene that I had a wonderful time with this scene. It has a weird attachment to me. It is a James Dean scene, and we should say there are some brilliant James Dean scenes in this movie. There aren't enough of them. In this scene, we have him making tea for Leslie, and so it's just Elizabeth Taylor and James Dean coming from the outside into his house, and it starts with a gunshot.
Yeah, is that a weird way? I mean, maybe it's a Texas like a text or something. When you want to get somebody's attention, you shoot your gun to get them to stop
from the top of your oil derrick. That's exactly how it works.
That was kooky. Yeah. Why do you love this scene so much?
Well,
what about it is draws you into it?
First of all, it's James Dean. I think his performance is absolutely sublime. His sense of shame, his sense of just befuddlement at this entire experience of having this woman that he obviously cares for in his house, trying to do something right. And gentlemanly and proper, and yet failing at every turn, I think is just wonderful. It is the high point of his sort of befuddled ranch hand character before he turns into something, the Mr. Hyde version of himself. And I have a real affinity with that. I love the weirdness too. I love the weirdness of the production design, that he actually has pictures of Leslie cut out of newspapers, in assorted poses, pasted up on his wall.
Were they all Leslie or just the one?
Oh, I thought they were all Leslie from different magazines.
I assumed that it was just her wedding picture and then other girls kind of cut out and posted around it.
I'm going to need to go back and look at that.
See it that closely.
My look at it was that it was all her. Either way, it's weird when she walks in and sees it, and then they sit down, and she is so wonderfully proper and kind to him and so generous socially. There's one thing I can say to you, Jet, you make a wonderful cup of tea. And his response just a little bit later is, well, that's not good at all, is it? When he takes a taste of the tea. I think it's fantastic. It also...
And then she doesn't say no.
Yeah,
she just says, so when are you going to get married so you can get help with things like this?
And all of that subtext, him talking about how he's going to find a woman. He's going to go back east and see if he can find somebody there, which is exactly how she ended up in Texas, right? That Bick found her back east, right? Clearly, he's telegraphing his affection for her, and I think her kindness is her way of sort of telegraphing the what if. She, I think, clearly has an affection for him that is a little bit of a puzzle, that you don't really get a sense of, what does she really think about him?
But I never get an impression that she's interested in him. I think that she is a very generous person who gives of herself and likes to talk with people and sit down with people and all of that. And I think that she finds Bick Jet a curiosity, and is very polite to him. And she doesn't say anything about the fact that he's got her pictures cut out and hanging on his wall, which is kind of creepy.
Well, nor the fact that he is clearly also broken in several significant ways. And my criticism of Bick's transition to having trouble with alcohol absolutely doesn't stand here. We get to see him actually sneaking a drink, and literally sneaking a drink in the other room, trying to soften the hard edge of having her and in there, the shame that he's feeling, the anxiety, and he is very, very clearly a quite stubborn racist.
Yes, very true.
And that's hard. That's a hard conversation for them to have, and it was clearly difficult for them to have. I think this is a real high point in the film for me, as a result of all of these things going on, the subtext, the emotional text, and both of these performers are just great. I really enjoyed this sequence.
Well, and it's just it gives you that sense of, he's with the woman that he really wants, and maybe it's because he really likes her, maybe it's just because it's the woman that Bick has. He definitely seems to have that angle also, but also it's just that one-upsmanship that he really wants to kind of prove himself, and he says, someday I'll have a place no one will be ashamed of.
Yeah.
And and I love that she looks down and he's got those like books of like masterly English on his table. Like he's trying to get himself to a place where he actually is a man of status without actually having the money for it. Right. It just says so much about who this guy is. It's a really amazing scene and works really well. And I do feel that it's a great turning point for him as a character, because as she leaves, she steps in the mud, and of course that's how he kind of ends up discovering the oil and everything. But I feel like there's enough in the subtext going on here that for me, it's clear how he's going to go down this darker road. And I really like that, because he seems like he could have gone down a better road, but there is enough darkness in him. and enough anger about people like Bick and stuff that he's got that one-upsmanship, and he wants to show them that he is better.
Totally.
So I found it really compelling scene.
Totally. This is where those roads part that we were talking about, right? That were it not for Leslie, he might have ended up in a very different place, a softer place, a gentler place, a much more sort of world-aware place. And that's exactly where Bick ended up. And I think this is that sequence, and I think it's an important one. Camera, William Mellor.
Yeah, it's the camera work here is nothing too. It'll knock your socks off or anything, but I think what you find consistently throughout this film is that Stevens and Mellor really like to linger on shots. They like to kind of hold on longer takes, and it works nicely in context of the story. You get some really just powerful long shots of scenes that are allowed to just kind of play out and linger. This scene doesn't have quite as long shots as some of the other ones do, but it's still, you can get a sense that they found a way to tell the story with as few camera moves as possible in a way to just allow you to kind of get into the characters.
We have only talked about one other film in William Mellor's extensive catalog, which is Compulsion, which he did just a couple of years later, 1959. Also terrific.
That is a fantastic film.
Production design by Boris Levin. Mostly the pictures. I love the pictures, but his entire hovel is great. What I like even more, though, and it's not in the scene, but immediately outside of his scene, is the way his hodgepodge Beverly Hillbillies oil derrick comes together. It's just perfect for me, and I think it looks so of the era and of the construction, capability that it really sells his transition for me.
I don't know why this struck me as something that I was so fascinated with, but I was so enamored with the idea of the oil, like when he strikes oil. It's not in this scene, but it's shortly after. Mm-hmm. But it's like, how do they make fake oil in the movie? Like, what? I mean, obviously they've got like tanks under that have some black gooey stuff, but I mean, it obviously can't be something that's going to harm the environment. Like, I don't know. I was so curious about it, and I couldn't find anything online, but it is one of those things that
and he kept putting it in his mouth.
Yeah, I was like, oh, why is he opening his mouth and drinking down the oil? Ugh.
I don't care for that.
No, but it was an interesting thing, and obviously something that the production design team had to sort out. But they did. They did a good job with all of that stuff. I've never found an oil eruption in a film that didn't satisfy me. I don't know what that's. I'm an oil man that never had my own oil rig, I guess.
I think there are some therapeutic depths to plumb in your psyche there, Andy. I think that would be a real treat for some enterprising therapist. Gordon Bow was a makeup supervisor and did the age makeup. So you'd seen this movie before. Did the age makeup hold for you any better than this time?
I listened to them talking about it a little bit beforehand, and something that clued me in and was like, okay, I will accept it. I still don't like it, but I'll accept it. It's the fact that George Stevens, when he set out to make this, he opted to cast younger people and make them look older instead of casting older people and then pretending they were, in their 20s when we're starting the story. And then they get older to kind of their actual age, or maybe a little older. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was kind of an interesting angle to go, because I don't know, I guess in my mind, when they're young, you get much more of the kind of that eager beaver sort of, they're not quite as cynical yet. They have their ambitions and everything in front of them. And so I could kind of click with that in the younger parts of the story. And yes, it's a little rough still as it gets older, but in my head, I just looked at it like, okay, it's like theater. It's like, you're going to just put them in a gray wig and a couple extra lines on their face, and now they're 50.
Yeah, right. Well, and Rock Hudson, I think, sold it. Rock Hudson was probably the best of all of them in there. for me as he got older. I think maybe it's his height, his stature. He felt the most at home in what is otherwise some kind of weird age makeup. I think Elizabeth Taylor, I found myself reflecting on the way she moved her body, and I think she embodied the age much better than she looked the age. In terms of her makeup, but the worst was the Howard Hughesification of James Dean. It was rough. Yeah, it was definitely rough.
You know, I should probably give a shout out to our special effects team, Ralph Webb and Jack Cosgrove. They're probably the team that was behind stuff like the oil rigs, the eruptions from the oil rigs. More so than Boris Levin, or at least working in conjunction with him. So kudos to them. I think that it all worked quite nicely.
Well, and you know, in the spirit of elemental effects, there's a lot of rain and wind in the bottom end of this movie, and that would be credit to them as well. There's a storm that you get the feeling, I think, that the entire hotel complex is about to be ripped off of its foundations. There's so much wind, and that, you know, if you've been through a Texas storm, that rings. That rings true. So that was it was great. And I love how just everybody was so happy as the doors are blowing open and rain is pummeling them from the outside, and everybody's still smiling with their drinks in hand. That's Texas too. Dmitry Tyomkin is the man behind the music.
And he's a composer that's done a lot of great stuff. I feel like we've talked about him on the show a few times. I can't recall what right off the top of my head, but High Noon, that's one of them. I think he does a great job here. He's got some nice themes. I love Jet's theme and how that evolves over the course of the film. So, I think it works well here in context of the film.
Editing. I want to talk about editing just briefly, Andy. William Hornbeck and Robert Lawrence, and this is not about our deep scene dive again, but the final fight sequence in the restaurant with Sarge is edited in a way that is unique to the entire film. Did you notice?
And shot.
Right. We had many more. It felt like a different team came in to do this thing.
Yeah, the strange POV shots all of a sudden.
Strange POV shots, strange blocking, strange cutting, the sort of the really quick cutting. It added a sense of exhilaration to the fight. It I thought was it made the fight much more just sort of real and tactile for me, and it kept cutting back between the Luz and screaming to, let him go, stop. The family is in trouble, and then it would cut to the baby, who was clearly unfazed by the entire thing. Had no issues at all. And the sound was handled interestingly too. They would mute out the sound of everything but the fight. And I thought that was, what was going on in I guess, is there a soundscape? I can't remember if there's music in that sequence, but it was really a gritty fight scene. I thought it was great. Credit to those guys.
Yeah.
Just running through the cast, a few others that we want to touch on. Rock Hudson, obviously, as Jordan Bick Benedict Jr. is Rock.
Yeah, he's
Rock.
a big man.
I did like it when they put him, obviously it's of a time, but they put him and Elizabeth Taylor in separate beds. That's oddly prescient. I do have to say, though, the coffee was weird. Did you catch that? Who does that?
I did. That just was a strange thing. Like, why are they drinking coffee in bed before they go to sleep?
And it wasn't just
like they actually have a
cup.
pot sitting there.
It was like the whole deal. Yeah. They have the pot and the sugar and the cream on a tray in between them, and he was just there making coffee. Like, that is not a thing that I would want my actors to do during a scene. And then
that was weird.
He put this big tablespoon of sugar in his coffee and then went right to bed without brushing his teeth. I had a real problem with that.
Oh, he's going to have a caffeine high. And well, she does say in our deep scene dive, she does say, oh, it's nice to have someone who drinks tea. Everyone here just drinks gallons or coffee by the gallon or whatever. So there's your example right there.
Yes, it is. Carol Baker as Luz Benedict II.
What's great about her is that she's actually older than Elizabeth Taylor. And she's playing her daughter, which again goes to kind of the theatricality of stuff like this, where it feels like theater when, the actor's age doesn't matter necessarily, as long as they carry themselves well on screen. And on screen, Elizabeth Taylor, when she's got her gray hair and she's kind of acting a little more parental, And then you have Carol, who plays that Luz very nicely as opposite her. I think it actually works.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it did work. I actually really liked Luz. I thought it was great, and I thought she was great when she was being hit on by Dean, by Jed. I thought that was
but her
cool.
best scene is when she goes to see him after, and she's standing in the doorway just watching him. That's a real heartbreaking scene, and it works really effectively.
Oh, the way she closes the door. Oh,
yeah,
you're right. Heartbreaking. Mercedes McCambridge as the elder Luz.
Man, what I guess it's kind of a Texas ranch woman. I don't know. She was a tough cookie, and certainly a tough personality. But what was so great about her is that this is Mercedes McCambridge, who we've talked about on the show before, because she was Pazuzu, Pete.
It's so weird.
She is the voice of the demon in The Exorcist, which is fantastic.
Oh my
Throw a little
goodness.
bourbon in there and a little cigarette, and next thing you know, you've got Pazuzu.
Dennis Hopper, of course, is the young Jordan Benedict III.
I love watching Dennis Hopper in these early films.
He's kind of mesmerizing.
Well, and it's such a change from what he would become in the later in the 60s when he'd get into the Easy Rider phase and the drugs and everything, and become really kind of a different person. Here he is just such like a clean cut guy, and it's kind of refreshing to see a version of Dennis Hopper that is not the one that's more kind of stuck in your head.
Oh, I totally agree. It was I found him really compelling, and I think he sold it well as the young enterprising doctor. I thought he was just terrific in this sequence. His final scene, the showdown with his dad, was another one of those real highlight sequences for me in their relationship. I thought it was just great. He was wonderful. Not the same. I can't say the same for Sal Mineo, who I think was what is the word? Underutilized.
Yeah, it was great to see him again, fresh on the heels of Rebel Without a Cause. But at the same time, it's just like, why did they even bother bringing him in for this? Yeah. It was kind of a disappointment to have him credited, and then you see so little of him.
Rod Taylor as Sir David Caffrey.
Yeah, we haven't talked about him since 101 Dalmatians, but here he is again. He's the Aussie who, I think this was very early in his career. This is one of his first features, and here he is kind of, I think, who is he married Judy, I think?
Oh, right. And that was the creepy wedding.
I can't remember.
But was this the one where Bick shows up and sneaks around the corner?
I think so.
It was creepy.
Yes.
I could not get my eyes off of him sneaking his head around the corner to watch Leslie from behind.
Yeah, that was a little
not great.
Stalkerish. Yeah. She's got a lot of stalkers.
A lot of stalkers, Liz Taylor. And Nick Adams.
Yeah, this was sad. I mean, James Dean died really kind of before he had a chance to finish doing all of the stuff he needed to do for this. And his whole last scene when he's in the hotel ballroom giving his little spiel and everything, the audio just wasn't very great. And Nick Adams, who was a friend of his, who actually was Chick in Rebel Without a Cause, he actually, I guess they thought that he sounded enough like James Dean, and he actually was brought in to dub the last few lines in the last few scenes that James Dean was in.
How to do an awards season.
This was a popular one. I mean, all the critics loved it. All the audiences loved it. It was one that just kind of moved everybody. It ended up getting 7 wins and 15 other nominations. It was nominated for 10 Oscars, but it only ended up winning for Best Director. That was the only thing that it took home. George Stevens did win that. The big films that it lost to were Around the World in 80 Days, which it lost Best Picture to. It lost Best Adapted Screenplay to, and it lost Best Film Editing to, and it lost Best Music Scoring of a Dramatic or Comedy Picture. So all of those won for Around the World in 80 Days instead. And then The King and I was the other big film that year. And James Dean and Rock Hudson were both nominated for Best Actor, but they lost to Yul Brynner. And Best Art Direction, Set Decoration, Color, and Best Costume Design, Color. Both of those also lost to The King and I. The other award was Mercedes McCambridge for Best Supporting Actress. She lost to Dorothy Malone in Written on the Wind.
I don't know. What do you think about what do you think about that Around the World in 80 Days thing?
This is one of those years where I was reading about it, and it sounded like I can't remember if it was the producer or somebody behind Around the World in 80 Days was just a real marketing machine type of person, and one of those people who was able to kind of tap into all the right people to get the award buzz and everything, and it ended up taking it, which, man, I don't know. I tell you, I'm not overly thrilled that Around the World in 80 Days won. I mean, it's an enjoyable enough film, but certainly is not what I would have given Best Picture to. That being said, I don't know what I would have given it to. The other films nominated were Friendly Persuasion, which I haven't seen, The King and I, which I haven't seen, and The Ten Commandments, which I have seen, but it's been a long time.
Wait, you haven't seen The King and I?
I've seen parts of it.
Well, does that count? That's a thing you got to rectify. I actually really enjoyed The King and I, and I think Yul Brynner's performance is great. And given the other things that were released that year, I think it's fine that it is nominated and should have probably won more than it did, because I was not happy with Around the World in 80 Days.
Yeah, it's one of those stories that, it's kind of cute. I love the idea of it. Like, the concept is great. But I just feel like I don't know, the stories end up kind of becoming like just nonsense stories and opportunities to get as many cameos in as possible, which I think is just dumb. I feel like actually the adaptation that I remember enjoying more than anything else was the TV movie version that had Pierce Brosnan as what's his name?
Oh, that's interesting. The David Niven part as Phileas Fogg.
Yeah, right.
Fascinating. I don't think I ever saw that.
It was it was a TV movie version of it that was like a mini series, and I felt like they actually did a better job. And my recollection is it wasn't as silly as this one was.
Well,
and I didn't even bother seeing the one with Jackie Chan. I mean, that would just look so dumb.
It's Shanghai Noon, but in Britain.
No, it's Around the World.
Well, it is Around the World. But you know what? That Steve Coogan is a funny dude. I'm just going to say. He is a funny guy. And so I cut him
He's in some of my favorite stuff.
Yeah.
But
Jim Broadbent.
But they still felt they needed to go the same route of doing all the cameos and all the nonsense.
Yeah, no, it was a little nonsensical, but it's Jackie Chan, and the stunts were great, and it was a ride. So I think it is barely under the 6-star IMDb 6-star limit, and so I know that there is some degree, exactly a 0.2 star degree of guilty pleasureness going on here, but it was fun. It was fun for the kids. You big curmudgeon.
I don't know if I'm gonna
look at me. How quickly I came to the rescue of Jackie Chan's Around the World in 80 Days during our discussion of Giant. Can we please talk about this most amazing remake of Giant that I did not catch, and now I have to listen to?
Yeah, I had no idea this was even out there, but there is a musical that came out in 2009 of Giant. Yeah, it is I don't know much about it. I've never heard of it until I was kind of reading up about it, and sure enough, there it is. So
yeah, it looks like I'm not sure. I mean, it doesn't look like it made it to Broadway. I don't think it ever made it to Broadway. I think it was off Broadway in 2012. Yeah, exactly. And so it didn't get that kind of big notoriety, that big launch, but you can definitely find the score. I'm going to listen to it. I wonder if I'll like it more than Oklahoma.
Well, it's got songs like Did Spring Come to Texas, and Private Property, and Look Back, Look Ahead, and My Texas.
Don't forget the timeless classic, The Dog Is Gonna Bark. Okay. How'd it do at the box office, Andy?
Well, George Stevens had $5.4 million to make his Texas-sized movie, which equates to about $47.8 million today. His movie premiered in New York City October 10th, 1956, a bit over a year after Dean's tragic death. The movie opened nationwide November 24th and was a huge success, becoming the third highest grossing film of the year, behind The Ten Commandments and our favorite, Around the World in 80 Days. It raked in $39 million domestically, which is $345 million in today's dollars. I couldn't find any international figures, but apparently it was a huge film in France that year. Even with its massive runtime, the movie ended up with an adjusted profit per finished minute of almost $1.5 million. A solid film for the team and a fitting one for Dean's last film, as it was his most successful to date.
You know, Andy, I just don't think I'm wired for this movie. I get it, but it was just too long, and the things I truly loved about it were too few and far between.
I enjoy it. It's not a film that I would watch often, if ever again. It's something that I can enjoy, and I can see that there's some quality stuff going on in here. But it also, it took a while to get into. Once I was into it, I enjoyed it, but it did take me a little bit of time.
Well, then I think it's time for us to rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel, and you can see our stack of movies that we've talked about on the show. Or you can just swipe over in your show notes, tap on the word flickchart. It'll take you right to this movie where you can add it to your list and see how it stacks against ours.
First up, we have Giant, or The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the Numi version. I'm going with tattoos.
It's going to be tattoo, yeah.
Giant, or The Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
Munchausen for me, please.
Yeah, I'll say Munchausen. Giant, or Near Dark.
Near Dark.
I'm going to say Giant.
Okay.
Giants are vampires.
Yeah, I'm going to give you Giants. You can have it. I'm not going to.
You're not going to fight.
I'm not going to fight you on it.
Giant, or Star Trek Insurrection.
Star Trek Insurrection.
That's a rough one.
It's really not.
It is. It's got the silly Data. Although, as I said on the show, it has what I think are some of my favorite Star Trek aliens. I love that race. They were so fascinating.
What about the Baku?
I'm going to say Star Trek Insurrection only because I'd probably watch it first.
Yes, you would.
But I think Giant is a better film.
Maybe, but who's going to care when you're not watching it?
Giant or Volunteers? Absolutely Volunteers.
I feel like on principle I should say Giant, but I'm going to say Volunteers. I would definitely watch that first.
Giant, or Star Trek Into Darkness?
Definitely Into Darkness.
That one was so rough for me. I'm going to say Giant. I'm standing up for it, Pete. I'm going to do it.
Okay. All right.
I need to at least once.
Oh, well, then we should go to the mat. Here we go.
All right, ready?
1, 2, 3. Paper. Scissors.
Into Darkness takes it. Giant, or the Hudsucker Proxy? I'm going to say Giant.
I'm going to say Hudsucker. Natch. Okay. Here we go.
Here we go again.
1, 2, 3. Rock.
Scissors. Oh,
that's a one hit.
I tell you. Giant, or Bull Durham? Bull Durham for me.
Bull. Choke on it. Durham.
Giant, or Say Anything? And I will say Anything.
I will say Anything as well.
Well, that lands Giant at number 308 on our chart. 308 out of 351. It's pretty low. But, it's a tougher one. I do enjoy it, but it is a tougher one.
I think I'm, like I said, not wired for it. I think its length causes it to suffer a little bit, certainly in those rankings. I would watch a lot of movies before I would put this on again. On my personal ranking, this one landed at 798 out of 1,021 movies. How'd it do for you?
It landed 2157 out of 3956, which is about a 45%.
Okay, so mine's significantly lower than yours at 22%. If I were going by the algorithm, this should be at 1 star on letterboxd.com/thenextreel. Honestly, just based on Dean and Taylor alone, that feels too low to me. But this is certainly not in the 4-star category. I think it's a stretch 2.5.
And is that a like, or just a 2.5? Not really like.
I don't know. Where do you put it when you just don't think you're gonna be coming back to this movie very often? I guess it's.
I'd say you don't love it.
I don't
right?
love it. No, it's definitely mine.
Yeah, so I'd say no like.
All right,
from
no
you.
like.
Well, I'm a 3-star and a like, so
okay.
we're kind of close. But
so that rounds up to a 3 and a like. I will be the boat anchor on this one, but mostly I have to say again how cool James Dean is. I didn't think all that much of James Dean. I think I probably saw the movies that I'd already seen too early and didn't think much about it. Watching them back to back, I had a blast watching this guy work. A blast. He was amazing, super fun, a fantastic character actor, and I get it. I feel like after this little trilogy, I get it. He was a major loss.
Well, he certainly has he followed the school of acting as histrionics. I mean, he's very big in his performance in all three films. But I think that is part of what made him so good and so enjoyable and so memorable. And absolutely, I get it too. I mean, this is an actor who is mesmerizing to watch, and certainly, knowing that he really only made these three films and then died in just this horrible car accident before he even really had a chance to finish this one. I mean, it's tragic, and the potential projects that we lost because he wasn't around. It really it's very sad.
Very, very sad. His loss means our series is short, and that allows us to move on to something new. Woo! Tough segue. Oh, dark.
That was a little rough.
Dark.
Yes.
But Andy, I have to tell you, I am deeply excited about our next little series.
It's going to be fun.
Where are we going from here? Or shall I say, when?
I was going to say, it's a series maybe we already covered, Pete.
We'll never
This is,
know.
of course, that's right. This is our time travel series. We're going to have quite a bit of fun with this. It's all recent films. Everything is within the last, about the last decade. I think we start off in 2007 with the brilliant Spanish film by Nacho Vigalondo, Los Cronos Crímenes, or Time Crimes. Cannot wait to watch that one again. And then we do About Time, the romantic comedy. And then we do Interstellar, which I guess is kind of time travel. It's, I think, a stretch to land on this list, but it was one that was voted by our Patreon members. And then we end with the Ethan Hawke, Busiest Man in Hollywood film, Predestination.
Oh, I like that Predestination, Andy.
Yeah, it's a good film. It's a nice little grouping of time travel projects and a nice variety also. So it'll be interesting to kind of revisit all of them. Well, I see one of them for the first time because I still have not seen About Time.
Oh, this will be great. This will be great fun. I'm very excited about it, especially jumping back into Time Crimes. I think that's going to be a great way to kick us off next week.
So for our Patreon supporters, we have our options for the list that we're going to talk about. We're each going to pick 3 movies over on our Saturday Matinee, the Patreon supporters show. And we're each going to bring our lists and have a little battle. And for the lists, the options that we've come up with to connect to Time Crimes are... The first one is pretty broad, Pete. It should be an easier choice. It's time travel.
Yes,
and I think that's
time travel, right. But we should say it can't be one of the movies that we're talking about on the show.
That's absolutely right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, favorite time travel movies. The next option is films where the protagonists have to cover their faces.
Oh, yes.
But we have an exclusion here, no superheroes.
Right.
And then the last option is the downward spiral movies. Movies where our protagonist makes some choices and it keeps sending them on a spiral downward, and they keep trying to get out of it, but it just keeps going down and down and down.
Oh, I like that.
So those are the 3 options we're going to put to our Patreon supporters. They're going to vote, and then I guess you'll have to tune in to the Saturday Matinee and find out what it is that we're talking about.
Don't forget, patreon.com/thenextreel. Throw us a buck or two, and you can join the club. We would love to have you. We'd love to have you there on the Saturday Matinee. Love to have you on Discord. It's a great group. And talking about movies, please join us. The Next Reel couldn't happen without the hard work of Stephen Smart. He runs our Instagram program. Ben Steerick helping out over there. Ben Lott runs all things Twitter and the Blot Spot. And the Next Reel theme, Ragtime Instrumental. It was performed by Eli Catlin, which you can find on his SoundCloud page. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
Man, this movie had some trouble getting good DVDs out to people.
Boy, did it. Well, it doesn't help that they made a really crappy transfer, and a lot of people are upset about that.
It was really bad. It was really bad. But we did manage to siphon out a couple of stunningly fantastic 1-star reviews. Would you like to do the honors?
Sure. I have 1 star by J.L. Sands, who says, it was over 3 hours of really wasted time. Horrible movie. I watched Giant last night on TV, and it was over 3 hours of really wasted time. Horrible movie. The poor horse was so badly treated by idiot McCambridge and was then killed. No one in the film could have cared less. Really disgusting. The rest of the film was so completely overblown and badly acted and beyond any reality. Sorry, I wasted my time. Should have turned it off after the first few minutes. I think it speaks to a point that we didn't bring up is that I actually found it really interesting, personally, the way that they showed the horse abuse when McCambridge was riding. You had these really wide shots of her riding the horse, like trying to force it to get her to bring her back. And then you'd have these extreme close-up shots of her spurs sticking into the horse. It made for a really jarring moment. So I can see why somebody would be upset about the way the horse was treated. But at the same time, it's like, this is kind of the way it was. They would shoot the horse because it broke a leg or whatever.
Well, Susanna didn't mention that in her review, Boring and Ridiculous, from October 4th, 2008. She says, what is it all these people are praising? I saw nothing of the quality which they seem to see. Rock Hudson was ridiculous. James Dean and Elizabeth Taylor are too young to play their roles, no matter how much silver the makeup people spray into their hair. It was so long and boring. The blocking was clumsy and stilted. What else can I say? I could only get through 1 hour of this disaster. Academy Awards, give me a break. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, please, if you're going to leave a scathing review, at least get through the whole thing. I know I've complained about that. I know I've complained about movies that I wanted to turn off, especially that one thing you made me watch not long ago. Ugh. But God, that's frustrating. Now,
it seems to be a growing trend, and it's you shouldn't be allowed to.
You really should. You got to.
You haven't actually finished.
You got to finish the movie. That's all I'm saying. So, boring and ridiculous, maybe. The first hour was tough. I could make the case. But how would you know if you didn't get through that last hour, which was the best part of the movie? So that's all I'm saying, Susanna, if you're listening. Thanks, Amazon.
It's hard to believe that we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great conversations.
I was so excited for our big Star Trek film franchise series this season. All those movies adapted from Gene Roddenberry's original 1960s TV show.
As a huge fan, I know that you geeked out over analyzing the adaptations.
Absolutely. From the motion picture to the Kelvin timeline films, seeing the Enterprise crews on the big screen was a dream come true.
Our list of source material isn't just all books and plays. We have the original series in our list of source material. You can rent the episodes to watch and enjoy and support the show in the process.
For our Millennium Trilogy series, we covered films adapted from the original books that launched Lisbeth Salander, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Girl Who Played with Fire, and The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest.
As much as I love Fincher's version, the original Swedish versions are the way to go. We also did our Die Hard series in Season 7.
I can't believe Die Hard and Die Hard 2 were adaptations. Two of the greatest action movies ever.
Well, one of them at least. The other is awfully fun, though. We revisited the classic Mary Poppins for our 1960s movie musical series. A spoonful of sugar always helps the medicine go down.
Old Boy was intense for our Park Chan-wook Vengeance trilogy. And East of Eden and Giant were highlights of our James Dean series.
And a fun time travel mind bender with Predestination to cap things off.
Find all the books behind these adaptations and more at thenextreel.com/originals.
Dive into the source material for your favorite movies. Check it out today, thenextreel.com/originals.